Well, happy Friday, everyone. It's good to see you all as you enter this Friday, April 30th Zoom for our noon advocacy update. You may notice a couple of missing faces. Mark is out of town, as is Austin. So you will have Scott and I presenting the advocacy update today, and we have Leah Coons and Rachel Thomas from Member Engagement assisting us on the back end with our technology. So thanks to everybody for being here, and we're glad to see you. I think what we'll do is we'll kick off with a discussion of what is still pending in the state legislature for their veto session, which begins on Monday, May 3rd, which is just a couple of short days away. So, of course, the issue of school finance is still pending. I think everybody who's on this Zoom probably knows that late in the, I was going to say April, but this is late April. But before they left for their spring break, the Senate rejected on a 2020 tie the conference committee report for SB 175, which was the bill that combined the KSD appropriations, which is K-12, and the Gannon funding, with some policy provisions around private school aid, restrictions on remote learning, expanding, not only expanding tuition tax credits, but also establishing a new education savings account program. And of course, as the folks on this Zoom probably know, because I can see we have many of our faithful watchers, the House had narrowly approved that conference report earlier by a vote of 64 to 59, which is not veto override territory, and neither was, of course, a 2020 tie vote in the Senate, which killed it. So as a result, we are going into the final couple of, let's say week or 10 days or so of the session with no budget for K-12 education. And so that budget has not been addressed, and neither has the issue of reauthorizing the 20 mil levy for schools statewide. As you know, there's 20 mils that is levied that finances K-12 education, and it has to be just sort of routinely reauthorized by the legislature every 2 years. But due to some wrangling in tax committees and other areas, that reauthorization has not taken place either. So a big item yet on the legislature's to-do list, and they hope to be adjourned for the summer by May 13th is what their resolution says. So so they have a pretty busy several days ahead of them, as do we as your association advocacy staff. The other bill that is still kind of pending that we're keeping an eye on is Senate Bill 91, which is work-based learning programs for high school students. It exempts businesses from some liability issues regarding having students, on the shop floor or in your business, but it puts that liability on the school district. So it's something that we're watching. It's been there's been some back and forth on it, and the Senate will have to consider a motion to either concur or non-concur with some House amendments when the legislature comes back next week. So that is that's just a quick review of a couple of the things that are pending, and of course the school finance being the major item there. Maybe I'll stop real quick and see if there's any questions on SB 175 K-12 funding before we move on to some of the veto overrides that'll be taking place next week. If you want to put any questions in the chat or post them on Facebook, and we will get them answered. Not seeing anything, I'll give you a chance to think about your questions, and I'll turn it over to Scott to discuss a pretty full plate of possible veto override votes that the legislature is looking at next week.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Leah. Basically, the Governor Kelly vetoed several education-related bills, and when they return Monday for the wrap-up, Senate President Ty Masterson said they were going to have a veto override-orama, and I might add Lollapalooza to that. So it's going to be an interesting start of the session. Of course, you guys have probably kept up with all this, but I'll just review it real quick. The governor vetoed Senate Bill 55. That was the ban on transgender athletes participating in girls and women's team sports. This passed the House 76-43 and the Senate 26-11. It requires 84 votes in the House and 27 in the Senate to override. So this one, it requires a change of quite a few votes if they were going to override this one. Another education related bill that the governor vetoed was the civics, that was House Bill 2039, which requires high school students pass a civics test and financial literacy course to graduate. This passed in the Senate 25-13 and the House 72-51. So not a strong override vote there, especially in the House. So that one may be sustained. A couple of gun bills the governor vetoed. She vetoed 2058, which reduced the age to get a concealed carry permit to 18. And this passed the Senate 30-8, the House 80-43. So this is, I think, within override territory. The House also, the governor also vetoed House Bill 2089, which standardized firearm safety education training programs. This is the one that would require, if school districts have a firearm safety program, they have to use the NRA's Eddie Eagle program in kindergarten through 5th grade. This passed in the Senate 31-7. Obviously, an override vote would occur there. In the House, it was 79-44, so it's pretty close there. Two big bills that we'll also be watching are the tax cuts. The governor vetoed Senate Bill 50. This passed in the Senate 30-10 and the House 81-43, so definitely within veto override range. Senate Bill 50, the governor says, is too heavy on the business side as far as tax cuts go, instead of the individual side. And she says it will, do a lot of damage to the budget in future years. So we're following that, of course, because everything that affects the budget will affect public education. The governor signed the budget bill into law, and this was the bill that basically funded state government except for K through 12. But she had a lot of or not a lot, but she had several line item vetoes. And this is going to be a big tussle, I think, between the governor and Republican leadership, because one of the line items deals with basically who's in control of allocating federal COVID funds. And in the budget bill, it basically put the legislature or legislative leaders in charge. And the governor would prefer the process to go the way it did, the way it is currently, which is she has a task force, makes a recommendation to the State Finance Council, which she is the chair of, and she has the authority to call those meetings, would then sign off or approve or disapprove those COVID allocations. So that's going to be a big fight too. So we're going to have a lot of veto override attempts. I think those are the main ones, and of course, we'll be following those. A lot of them deal directly with education, and of course, the budget and the fight over the COVID funds will also directly or indirectly affect education. And I think now, unless you have any questions on these veto overrides. Okay, well, that's a good, Diane is asking if we anticipate the House sending the same funding policy bill over to the Senate. That's a good question, and I'll take a stab at it. And then if Leah wants to supplant or supplement, we watched the Ways and Means and Appropriations Committee meetings that met Monday and Tuesday, 20 hours of meetings, and basically they punted on K through 12 education and really gave no inkling as to how they were going to approach it. Christy Williams said at the end of the Appropriations Committee that funding and policy, what she calls policy, what we call bad policy, should be attached. And but whether that's going to happen, then you read a comment by Molly Baumgardner. She was quoted in the Cap Journal as saying she thought that some of that policy, that ship had sailed. She didn't say it exactly that way, but so it's unknown. I think a lot of it may depend on how a lot of these veto override votes go. So Leah, if you want to, provide any insight into that.
Well, I just want to add that Chair Williams, who's the chair of the House K-12 Education Budget Committee, she was adamant at the end of the House Appropriations Committee meeting about the funding and the policy need to go hand in hand, and she was pretty defensive about why that should be. And the Appropriations Committee chair, I think he seems like he's willing to just kind of work a clean bill through his committee, but he hasn't really come out and specifically said that. But it's interesting to see the two houses kind of jockeying but not doing anything on this until they can get everybody back in the building on Monday. It does kind of feel like, as far as policy versus not policy in a funding bill, it feels like the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object, and there's going to be some conflict there, I think. So that will be very interesting and very complicated to watch, and we'll definitely be reporting on that for you. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how quickly some of these override votes come. I think we're hearing that the SB 50, that tax cut bill, that override is probably scheduled for first thing Monday. And they are, bringing in everybody for the vote, including, I guess, at least one person who is very seriously ill is going to be brought in to make sure they nail down some of those votes. So there is much yet left to be explored on this funding issue. Good question, Diane.
And I'll just wrap up with a couple of items about bills that have been signed into law. You guys probably have heard about this, but I'll just quickly review it. The governor signed the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program bill into law. And this bill provides funding of not more than $10 million. I think they're calling this like a last dollar scholarship program for people to get a 2-year associate degree or a career in technical ed certificate. The governor signed into law a bill that shortens the period in which regulatory bodies are required to issue occupational credentials to military service members or their spouses. She signed into law this bill that creates a loan program to help cover the costs of these extraordinary natural gas bills that some entities have been receiving. And I think those were the major bills that we might be interested in that she has signed into law over the past few days. And I think Leah is, unless there are more questions, Leah was going to provide sort of an update as to what's going on at the federal level with the president's initiatives.
I will do that, and then we can take some more questions or comments. I see Steve Carlin on the Zoom, and I'd love to hear from him about his experience with the Governor's Education Council yesterday. And I know Scott and Mark were monitoring that as well. But you may have heard that on Wednesday night, the president, during his joint address to Congress, it wasn't a formal State of the Union speech, but he announced a program that he's calling the American Families Plan. And it's 1.8 trillion, so almost $2 trillion. And it has several pieces to it, but for our interest, it includes proposing free universal preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds. It proposes assistance for childcare costs for families. It also includes provisions for 2 years of free community college. So kind of piggybacking on our efforts in the state to make sure that people have that ability to get started on their early education, and also to get some post-secondary work that will help them in their career at a lower cost. So it kind of dovetails with some of those issues, but of course at a federal level. He is also planning to, in that plan, how many times can I say plan, improve teacher preparation programs, improve teacher retention and professional development. And also it significantly expands childhood nutrition programs by expanding some of the community eligibility provisions, and also providing for summer EBT in a more robust manner. So it's a $1.8 trillion plan that comes on the heels of, you know, the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that's funneling, you know, about $800 million to K-12 schools in Kansas. And there's also the infrastructure bill, which is the American Jobs Plan, which is, let's see, about $2 trillion. And that bill includes quite a bit of money for broadband expansion and for renovation of schools or rebuilding of schools. And also, I believe there's the lead pipe issue in there in school buildings. And so those are a lot of really big ticket items, you know, that the rescue plan is the one that has been signed into law and that we are dealing with now. But then you've got these other two that are pending. They have very high price tags. There's a lot on the congressional plate. So I think there's going to be a lot more discussion of this American Families Plan. But I think it's going to come after that infrastructure plan, which is not necessarily being warmly welcomed by some in Congress who are really afraid of those big price tags. So I just wanted to give you kind of a quick 30,000 foot overview of that, since you probably heard something about it this week. And just let you know that we'll be doing some more work on that and filling you in on some more of the details as those develop. So I would open the floor for questions, either from Zoom or from Facebook. And maybe while people are thinking about it, I was hoping maybe we could kind of prevail on Superintendent Steve Carlin to give us some of his recollection and sort of your takeaways from the Governor's Education Council meeting yesterday, Steve. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot.
Yeah, sure, Leah, happy to do that. So that's a really good group. I think we had close to 60 members in attendance at the meeting yesterday. We met via Zoom. It's chaired by Cindy Lane and Fred Dirksen from Dodge. In the context of this group and the advocacy concept, there were probably two themes. We spent probably 3/4 of the meeting time dealing with these issues, but Mark gave a really nice overview of the legislative session, and for those that weren't following it closely, and we broke it into some smaller groups, and I think pretty consistently from each of the groups, some of the takeaway was that there really seems to be the realization that there was a real kind of negative environment towards public education in the legislature this year, and that much of that did not align with the direction that Kansas, the State Department, school districts are trying to move. That seemed to come through pretty loud and clear. Kind of a second theme, we also heard from Tom Kelly with the Education Commission of the States. And Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Education Commission of the States is a national kind of independent, nonprofit, kind of nonpartisan group that just kind of follows education policy at the national and the federal and state levels. And they shared quite a bit of information about the trends that they're seeing in education policy at the federal level as well as in different states. And again, the theme that kind of came, I think, out from a lot of our groups was that the Kansas legislature seems to be an outlier there in terms of the direction that Kansas is going. So I don't know that we necessarily defined any next steps. I think we more kind of all had a realization that there's probably some issues that we need to think about and address, and probably from that advocacy standpoint, education standpoint, for our communities, for our parents, our families, because I think if we continue to see that disconnect, that probably doesn't bode well for Kansas children in the future. So we also have a few subcommittees that gave reports, one on early childhood and childcare, one on work-based learning, and the Diploma Plus or market value asset kind of concept, and one on Advantage Kansas, trying to make partnerships with the business community to keep us competitive and able to fill some of our high needs and critical kind of positions going into the future. And I should mention too, this isn't just a K-12 group. This not only includes the K-12, but it's pre-K as well as the higher post-secondary, higher ed, technical school kind of concepts. The governor's done a really nice job of assembling a group that represents all, and as well as the business community. It's not just educators. It includes business leaders as well. So if there's any questions, I'd certainly be happy, but thanks for the time to share that, Leah.
Sure, thanks, Steve. Scott, do you want to add anything? I know you were monitoring that meeting as well.
Yeah, I was, Steve covered it great. Steve should be a reporter. But there were two things that kind of made me perk up or listen, was when Blake Flanders, the president and CEO over at the Kansas Board of Regents, was talking about higher ed funding. And I guess I should have known this, but I didn't. But their funding basically has been flat, or because of their cuts in recent years, their funding level is at like 2009 levels. Where does that sound familiar? So that's we're funding the amount of state general fund aid that's going to higher ed in 2021 is the same amount that went out in 2009, and I just don't see how you progress under those kinds of circumstances. And then the other thing I'd add, and maybe this is just food for thought or something to worry about later, but Heather Morgan with the Kansas Association of Community College Trustees, I believe that's who she's with. She was talking about the Biden plan for free college, 2 years of college. And she was talking about there are a lot of strings attached to that, and it could end up being, it'll be a state choice issue, and it could end up being a fight like we have over Medicaid expansion. So I thought that's it's not something I look forward to, but it's obviously something to think about. But yeah, I think the Governor's Council, they have a really great group of people, and I think, like Steve says, a lot of them were kind of wondering, why is the legislature going in this direction when we need to be going in this? We need to invest in education and not be going the way we're going. So,
good question from Diane. Are either of the education committee chairs, so that would be Representative Christy Williams or Senator Molly Baumgartner, are they on the Governor's Education Council?
I think Molly is. I'm not positive. I think I've seen her at some of those meetings.
And then Dr. Carlin is saying he doesn't think so, or at least he hasn't seen the most up-to-date membership list, but neither was at the meeting yesterday. So good input there, good question, and good input. Kind of building on what Steve said about kind of the disconnect. I know a couple of people that I see on the Zoom today were also in our regional meeting last night, and there was a little bit of a discussion there about the disconnect and people feeling kind of frustrated that they'll even have some halfway decent, what they think seem to be productive conversations with their legislators, but then the votes don't follow that conversation. And I sense that people are frustrated, and I certainly acknowledge that frustration. It is very difficult this session, and I expect next session will be as well, because we have a number, there's not a change coming for at least 2 years in the makeup of the legislature, pretty much. So the key is to keep communicating our message and to keep trying to be as respectful and professional as we can, in spite of the frustration that we feel. So I appreciate everything that all of you do, and to support what we're doing, and your efforts to connect with your legislators in what is a very difficult time. Well, are there any other questions or comments or issues that we haven't discussed here today? Anybody on Facebook, please feel free to pass your comments along, and we will answer those questions or comments if we can. It's approaching 12:30, and we can certainly get done a little bit early here if we want. The short time of this update sort of belies the complicated issues that we have coming up in the next few days. They're going to hit the ground running on Monday, and they would like to be done, May 13th, as I mentioned. So there's a K-12 budget that has to be done, and 20 mills extended, and some vetoes overridden or sustained in a very short amount of time. So please make sure that you're keeping up with our Facebook updates every day, with our email and social media communications, and we'll try to do our best to keep you up to date with what's going on as we head into a very busy week next week. Any questions or comments before we close down for this Friday?
I think we're finding out without Mark and Austin, this is a much shorter.
Let's do a poll. Is that good or bad? Well, it could give everybody a chance to finish their lunch and maybe even get outside for a few minutes and enjoy this beautiful weather. Dale's thumbs up before your lunch hour is over. As always, please don't hesitate to contact any of us here at KASB if there's anything we can do to help you advocate for your schools with your legislators and with your community. We certainly appreciate everything you do, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everybody.